to another episode of Unscripted. And Terrance Cooley, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. How are you?
Thank you, David. I'm doing pretty good. Perfect day in paradise, as you can probably see.
I got some chickens outside, and the roosters, is making some sounds. Hopefully, we'll be able to edit this post-production. But love to have you on the show. I'm always excited to talk to people that have done so much and advanced their career, and then also giving back to the community by getting on these type of conversations. So I really appreciate that. So when we get started, and just talk about specifically about how you got started. You joined the forces, and maybe what was kind of your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so I started in 2011. I was on my 5th year of community college, trying to figure out what it is I wanted to be. Fifth year.
It's even possible to do that many years?
We changed your degree 3 times. Absolutely. So I struggled trying to find my identity in my early years. So I was about 23 when I enlisted into the United States Air Force. They put me in a radio frequency and satellite communications career specialty. So I started out doing that and very quickly learned how to adapt in that environment. Building networks from radios is actually a really different kind of perspective than when you have an IP-based infrastructure. So it was really unique, and I got to deep dive into that. But the problem with the military is when you excel very well technically, they will pick you up and drop you off to be a leader or manager at a field outside. So I actually got picked up to be the program manager of our IT logistics when I was in Ramstein in Germany. And from there, everything just shot off because I found I enjoyed the challenge of taking what I knew about moving mobile wireless systems, moving them across the world internationally, running convoys, and managing all these different crisis rescue type projects all simultaneously. I did that for about 5 years before I moved on into my journey to a cyber threat hunter and SOC analyst, where I got to deep dive again into a highly technical career field, excelled at that, and lo and behold, got plucked to be risk and compliance VP, overseeing our entire assessments risk management portfolio. That was really cool too. And all the negotiations, the brokering, getting all your stakeholders on the same page, working with your board of directors who've got all these conflicting requirements. Awesome. And right as I was getting to the end of that point in my career, I got plucked again to go lead here where I'm at near in Sacramento for the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Research and Development Lab, JADC2 R&D for short, where I'm leading as the Chief People Officer and the Chief Information Security Officer for our R&D lab of hand-picked specialists, which I know for the corporate world, selectively hiring your top talent is kind of old hat, but for the military, it's really novel concept.
Yeah, that's incredible. And if you don't mind, just let's kind of unravel some of those milestones that you went through. So first of all, it's incredible that, you mentioned you're looking for your destination and you couldn't find it in a community college, and then you really excelled in the military, in the Air Force, and you were excellent. And then you got bumped into, different various roles. What do you think specifically in your skill set that made you, so adaptable and so, excel in this particular role in being the forces?
That's an excellent question. I credit that a lot to growing up in a military family. My stepdad was a Marine. My mom works for the Department of Defense, and that made us travel a lot. I was born in Michigan, and I believe I was around 8 when I was moved all the way for the first time to California, where I lived in Oceanside. And from there, it's just been a back and forth all over the country. The only place I have not yet been to is Hawaii. And when you are constantly uprooted, dropped into a new environment and forced to learn how to make new friends, how to be challenged in new academics that you may or may not have learned, have no support network and have to rebuild that every single time throughout your entire life, I think it creates an incredible amount of resilience that you can apply to every part of your life.
It's what doesn't kill you make you stronger, right? So you went through, kind of because I'm assuming as a young child it's a bit of adversity, right? To being, outrooted and put in a new place and trying to figure out, who are your friends and creating new groups and new friends and so on, especially when at that young age. But in terms of your skill set, you obviously have very unique skill set, be able to, be very technical and be able to adapt very quickly and absorb like a large amount of information very quickly and apply that. That's part of your military training. And people that are in the civilian world don't understand that the training in the military and the Air Force and so on is very, very dense. So whatever you do in 6 months, that's not a 9 to 5 where you like go home and go out drinking with your friends. That's like more like 6 a.m. to like 6 p.m. and then you have more homework when you're done. Talk to me about that experience and how did you manage again to excel in that? Because again, the community college is different. They teach you a bunch of stuff but it's a very different environment, very unstructured. And then you came in and you excel actually in an area where it's very structured, very, very dense, and very stressful to say the least as well.
Absolutely. Well, when I first joined, my first technical school was 8 months long, where we had 10 blocks of instruction, where you had between 2 to 4 weeks where you would be learning very detailed mechanical engineering, electronic systems engineering, physics. There is a point where we are literally taking a radio, firing the signal against a layer of the atmosphere, the troposphere, punching hundreds of watts, thousands of watts in many cases through it to bounce it off to hit another point at a very high degree of accuracy. And you have to learn that in 2 weeks.
You don't do that in community college.
No, they don't teach you that stuff. So you get a lot of hands-on education, you get a lot of theory, you get a lot of practical application, and you have a lot of performance assessments that you get one, if you're lucky, maybe 2 chances to pass, or you're out. And you have to retake the entire block, or they take you out of that technical environment and put you into something easier. So you have to excel in that environment. And I left that first school as a distinguished graduate, which means I've scored over 90% on all of my academic assessments and performance evaluations. And that was a really cool achievement because only the top 10% get to do that. So you really have to be someone who is either committed to education or has a strong study groups, which is what I use, working with all of my other peers to make sure that we could get into that, because you wake up at 6, you leave at 3:30, and you're not done at 3:30 because you have additional follow-on things plus all the military add-ons that are added on top of that you don't have to deal with from the civilian sector.
Yeah, exactly. And, I hear you speak and, it's in contrast to, I guess, like if somebody, watched Forrest Gump, for example, right? Like they just say, okay, all I have to do is just just follow orders and do simple menial tasks. But what you're describing is on the other end of the spectrum, highly sophisticated, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, all of that. You have to have a certain skill set. And I think that's something that is not being transmitted enough, I think, for people that are, maybe young audience are listening to this and are thinking about military career. There's just so much available for you and for ways for you to excel, both academically and hands-on and have all those experiences. Because again, I think that we don't do justice. Most of the military movies are, they're not showing that. They're showing a lot of this other stuff. Like, okay, you're running around, like on a hill somewhere or carrying like a big backpack, but it's not always like that, right?
No, and a lot of that is a misconception between how the different branches run. You see a lot of Army-specific movies, a lot of Marine-centric movies. When you see the Air Force, like Top Gun, for example, is the Navy, right? But there's a similar culture to aircraft that we deal with there, where there's a lot of rigor, a lot of discipline, where you are going through these kind of insane scenarios and you're going over them over and over and over again until you get them right. And it does require a high degree of understanding of the different levels of authorities within the organization, how different organizations interact with each other. All those pieces combined are what bring the top performers to the forefront. And even anyone who just comes in for like a 4-year career to get their GI Bill so they can pay for college, get some work experience in their portfolio, it's essentially a paid internship where you're going to do things that you won't be able to do anywhere else.
And in terms of you having to reinvent yourself in different roles, why was that? Why didn't you just take the easy route and kept on doing the same thing over and over again? Maybe like advance in your rank, and because a lot of people just do that. A lot of people are, very comfortable staying where they are, doing the same things over and over again, and maybe getting like additional pay increase or whatever, but they stay put. You kind of glance over it, the fact that you were doing one thing, and then after 5 years, you kind of like decided, okay, let's do something completely different, and then had to learn everything from scratch. What was the driver behind that?
There's a couple of factors. I was very fortunate in the early half of my career to be able to move to 3 different organizations within my first year. I got to work with generic IT communications at the beginning. Then I got to work with pararescue communications, so our special operators, our combat medics. That was a really different environment. And so I'm doing the same job or very similar job there with the same equipment, but it's a whole different culture. And then I moved to Germany where I was working with what we call rapid deployable communications. So we're managing the Air Force's global crisis IT management strategy. When there's a crisis that pops up, we show up, set up communications, and then our back end comes in. If we're talking jets are coming in, POTUS is coming in, President of the United States. We're setting up all of that. So I have all these different portfolio projects, but I'm essentially doing the same thing. That was really cool. But when I get to the end of my time in Germany, essentially what I have is I can go back and do one of those things that I've already done, or I can get on a plane and do those things only in the air. And so from a career broadening perspective, I found I really enjoyed the different experiences, and I could still do the same thing, just in different ways, different approaches. But I hit a cap where I wasn't going to get new experiences doing that. I wasn't going to get to refine my tradecraft in a way that would have been personally satisfactory. So when I was given the opportunity to become a cyber threat hunter, I jumped on it. I prepared a little bit in advance to make sure I understood.
But why? It is why all of a sudden, that's a very different, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, did you even know what it was before you decided to sign off on the dotted line? Or, so that's my question. This is like, it takes some courage to go ahead and do that without, do you know what I mean? It just, most people are, it's definitely doing something outside of the comfort zone. You agree with me because that's absolutely something, and most people are not doing that. Most people are like, they're comfortable doing whatever because the natural progression for you would have been to, just like you mentioned, picking one of the 3 you already done. But you decided, no, I'm going to throw all of that away. I'm going to start doing something brand new. So is there something in you that you are, in your personality that you kind of like decide, okay, like I'll challenge me myself? Because when you worried that you're not going to be successful in the new role?
That never crossed my mind. And I don't want to sound like arrogant.
No.
So the way I was raised is you go out and do things. Like when I was a kid, 90s kid. So my parents go, come back when the streetlights on. So I have to figure out my own fun. There's no failure. Life is a sandbox. So yeah. I kind of have that approach when I go into the military. I want to do interesting things. That thing sounds interesting. The things that I have on my plate aren't quite as interesting, but I can still take those skill sets into whatever it is I'm doing anywhere. So when I saw that opportunity, I just go, I'll take my shot, because what's the worst thing that happens to me? Am I going to lose my life? Am I going to lose my job? No, I go back to things that I already know. I'll be successful in it, or I will get out of the military and just approach it from that perspective. So I look at what could possibly take me out. And if it's not life, limb, financial insecurity, or like going to cause great distress to me or my family, like what's the risk? So I jump into it, and there's a 6-month school, very similar, another tech school or technical school, where I'm being immersed. And unlike the radio school, it's a lot of, there's physics, there's a lot of theory. This is a lot of practical application, where you are learning how to set up firewall blocks, where you are learning how to maneuver and pivot between networks in order to from an offensive side from the Air Force, hold an adversary's assets at risk by being able to infiltrate their networks and turn off their key assets without them knowing. Or from a defensive side, looking at how is an adversary going to penetrate my very large surface area? What are the most critical things I need to protect? And what are the most easy access? And how do I prioritize that? Because the question isn't, is the adversary going to get into our network? It's when, what are they going to take, and how much damage are they going to do? How soon are we going to catch them?
And do you remember like the first couple of times where you were successful with these tasks? Like, do you remember what was it like? Like, what was the initial things that you were tasked to do, and you figure out that you actually, oh yes, I can be good at this?
Yes. So they start us really fundamental. Here's binary, and then you have to mentally go up to 256 bits or sections, whatever. And I'm like, I'm never going to need this again. Like even now, I'm like, when's the last time I had to talk about binary? But they start you from that base level, and then you go into assembly, you go into more programming. And I have a little bit of a programming background, so there's some familiarity with that. But then they start talking about, here's how operating systems are, here's how Linux works, here's how Windows works. And the satisfaction of being able to talk about how LDAP works and getting a test question that they had incorrectly listed as correct and being able to say here's exactly why your question was wrong, that was very satisfying. And building on those little steps where as I'm learning what they're trying to teach me, I go, oh, I'm familiar with this. As a kid, I used to tear down computers. My first computer was a Packard Bell. I'd reassemble it by the time I was 8. And little things like that you realize your other experiences apply into this, just help build confidence, working with peers. Unfortunately, I did not leave as a distinguished graduate from that one. I actually did fail one test, but overcoming that was
it's bad. You know?
Yeah, it's you know.
You really set. You have like very high standards for yourself. I can tell.
I try. I never want to be the limiting factor to someone else's success. And as I've had more leadership and management experiences, honestly, the hardest part was letting go that I don't need to be the subject matter expert in everything I touch. I don't need to be the super deep technical leader. I need breadth of experience. I need strong understanding of concepts. I need to be able to know when someone is just throwing jargon at me to hope I just say yes and check it off. But for the most part, I don't need to be the best. What I need to do is not be a roadblock to the people who are the best. So when I'm leading teams of threat hunters or SOC analysts, and they're telling me, here's what we found, I'm making sure they know I don't need you to come to me to ask for permission. I need you to come to me with your intent, and I'm only here to check that you have done your homework before I push it up, and I will advocate for you on your behalf.
And it's amazing because now, as you mentioned, like you have the technical acumen to be able to talk at eye level with these same people, but you don't necessarily have to have, the super duper, down to the weeds expertise. But you can, because of your background, evaluate from a managerial level if they're doing the right thing, or at least supporting them in the right thing for them to do. So you did that for 6 months, and then what? You've kind of, were you hands-on on that particular role until you moved to management, or were you bump into management straight away? Yes.
So I got to sit down at the Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA Global, in Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. And my role there was to protect the entire Department of Defense Information Network boundary. It's a $24 billion enterprise, 10 internet access nodes, and I'm responsible for doing network and traffic analysis on all of that.
That's kind of crazy after what, 6 months training?
6 months training thrown right into the fire hose at the boundary of it all.
But this is what this is what the Air Force, this is what the Army does. I mean, the people don't realize, again, like the amount of training. It's like you go through, 15 months course and a pilot course, and you're flying $1 billion aircraft. It's the same thing, right? You were like 6 months, and then you were like, the type of network you're defending, you're securing and having responsibility. I mean, how great a responsibility that is. How old were you? Like, you were like super young too, right?
I think I was like 27 at that time, 26.
So I'm laughing. It's just incredible amount of weight on your shoulders, and then you took it like, okay, yeah, let's just do it. Or what is it, like on the job, on OJT, on job training, where you're like, just throw it into the gauntlet and say, okay, here you go. Here's the network. Go defend it.
Yeah.
What was it like?
I wouldn't say it was stressful. You don't really feel the pressure. To me, it felt like another job. There are a lot of stakes in this job. And because it's the military, it's not just defending the network. It's defending all of our assets. So there was a high-scale operation where we did 107 hours of combat support to that, which led to a very highly publicized event. I wish I could tell you more about it, but it's been on the news a few times. And during that time, it is high stakes, 24/7 operations. You are assessing and remediating threats as they're coming in. You have nation-state actors who are probing the network and trying to pull their exploits. And if you're able to catch them, you can stop them at the boundary. But if you're watching to see how far they got in and letting lower-level defense agencies know at the Tier 1 and Tier 2 level to quickly be able to action on that and minimize damage, because it was a highly, unfortunately, I don't really like getting into politics, but it was a very politically sensitive time period. And you're getting involved in these kind of missions kind of like on the daily. That part was really cool. But it did get to a point after about 2 years on the floor where the missions that were really interesting were drying up, and it was more of a persistent defense where I'm now looking through and looking for specific indicators, taking intelligence sources and TTPs from our tactics, techniques, and procedures from our adversaries, and trying to map that to exploits that we're detecting or have not yet detected, because I'm looking for what new threats are they going to throw in at us, what new exploits are currently on the market that I need to be seeing are we vulnerable to. And it was getting, I don't want to say stale, but when you have all those high stakes things that you're doing at the very beginning, and now it's just regular kind of work. Not that the work isn't important, but I realized I was more for, I want to do something new and different. And that is when I got pulled up to be my, the VP of risk and compliance, but also at the same time, I got pulled to be the executive assistant to our CEO. That is a there's a lot that goes into all of these roles. You want to talk about doing things different. Now I'm doing HR.
And Terrance, you have a lot of times where you do like a dual role. Like it seems like it's something that you're like forte to do both, a couple of things all at once.
Yes.
Most people are not good at multitasking like that, I can tell you.
It requires a lot of time management and a lot of trust in the team around you. That's where I really got to internalize. I'm in charge of this team. They are specialists in their HR functions. I am not an HR lead. I've never had to manage someone else's calendar before. I've never had to schedule for anyone else. So I'm learning all of that. And I'm also in charge of several financial programs on top of doing all the risk and compliance things. And I just have to trust my team. Here's my guidance. Here's the CEO's guidance. Go forth and conquer. I will not be a roadblock to your success. So that's where I really internalized that. And from that, we were able to pass a number of inspections with high marks, high regard. Our financial programs were top in class, and many of the tactics that we were using in those programs actually get pulled up to a higher headquarters and corporate levels, because they're like, why wouldn't we do that? That's why hasn't this been done before? We thought they were fairly obvious things, because I trust my team to come up with solutions, and then I make sure if there's something good happening, they get credit for it. And if there's a mistake, I take the fall for it.
Let me ask you this, because you have a really interesting background in terms of being able to be on the ground and defending, our critical assets in times of conflict as well, which is it's a lot of this behind the scenes stuff we don't see. How does the military and Air Force and the forces, how do they manage to stay relevant and on the forefront of technology from, what's going on out there from, as you mentioned, there's a lot of new methodologies on hacking and reverse engineering and exploits and all that. How do you make sure that you stay relevant and are able to, it's basically like an arm race, but instead of being the physical, tactical, kinetic race, this is a cyber race. So how do we stay relevant as a nation? How, again, just from your point of view?
That is probably the number one challenge I've had to field. Our biggest issue right now is that we hire highly technical individuals who want to expand their tradecraft. They want to go very deep into into their specialties. They want to do host analysis. They want to do malware. They want to do development. They want to do network security. They want to do offensive combat operations. And as a force, when we get them, we have to hold them on a contract for a certain amount of time. And at the end of that contract, what most of them do is they take that skill set and they move out into the civilian sector. And then the main two things that come up are culture. Military is a government organization. As an organization, we are slow to adapt new technologies and new strategies, but we have personnel who are very quick to deep dive, immerse them. Many of us have their own labs in our houses that we're testing exploits. We're running tactics and scenarios in our free time, and we bring that into the forefront. We don't have a strong mechanism, broadly speaking. There are definitely programs that internalize this, but broadly speaking, there isn't a corporate strategy around integrating new technologies quickly in cyber outside of working with the NSA, National Security Agency. From the Air Force perspective, we are getting better at it, but we're bleeding out a lot of talent who are coming with that kind of drive and motivation because the government can't pay competitive rates to the civilian sector. Like, we're not profit enterprises. So we have to find different ways to retain talent. But as the talent that we do keep starts moving up to more and more senior levels, they're able to start going, we need to do X, Y, and Z and start changing the culture of the force. It's a bureaucracy, it's slow, but our senior leaders are realizing that this is a warfighting domain. They are starting to resource us significantly more than before. They are working hard to retain talent, and so we are getting there. But it is probably the biggest challenge in this domain compared to the other ones that are already more established and have legacy networks and processes. Yeah,
it's super interesting because, again, the culture has to be different. It has to adapt to the people that you want to retain, right? It's just like if you look at some of the elite units, for example, I know not all of them are even wearing uniforms, right? But because they're like, so is there something like that in your neck of the woods in the community where you get all those, highly proficient cybersecurity professionals and they are different, they're slightly different because of the type of individual they are, right? They're like hackers, right? They're supposed to be hackers. So is there a culture that you are promoting internally or trying to adapt to make sure that these people are, again, if you can't pay them, maybe there's some other perks or some other things you can provide to make sure that they are more willing to stick around and advance in the forces?
Absolutely. So because of the organization I'm in now, we're a tier 1 team as opposed to where I was at a tier 2 team. So I have myself, I have one other.
So what does that mean, Terrance?
Sorry. Tier 1 is where it's your local defenders. So if I have a local security team at a small branch office, that would be my tier 1. When I move up to a corporate level where I have visibility on multiple tier 1 teams, that brings me to a tier 2. And a tier 3 would be your top level. That I would consider our U.S. Cyber Command would be our tier 3 provider, providing warfighting assets across the force. So right now I'm in a tier 1 local security team working with another Air Force unit to provide tier 2 support to us. And locally, I have 2 counterparts, one who is a captain and is an offensive specialist, so a lot of pen testing, a lot of direct risk management offensively. And then I have my counterpart who is a defensive digital forensic incident responder. And the culture that I create for that is 100%, here's your domain. You are my subject matter expert. You are the senior security expert for defense. You're the senior security expert for offense. I am the person who will sit in all the meetings, advocate for you, and free up your time so you can go after just the things you want to be going, that you're passionate about. And they're the ones that solve a 4-year gap in 6 months because they are free, they're trusted, they don't have to go through all the red tape. We have a long commute because where I work is at near Yuba City in California. It's not the greatest location. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. But a lot of our folks live near the Sacramento area, the Roseville, Rockland area. So that's about a 30, 45-minute commute. I have cut my guys if they don't need to be in the office. And many of the things we're doing can be done unclassified. I cut them to remote work. And so they have excellent work-life balance. They're able to, when they're not on task or on a specific project, they're able to go after the things they're passionate about. My defense counterpart actually just did DEF CON, and he was the number 2 selectee during that event for the hacking challenge. 100%. And that training, that tradecraft is going to continue to promote dividends here in the Air Force and for our organization. So I free them up, and when I need them, I call them, and they're there. I can't ask for a better talent than that.
So cool. And you mentioned, Top Gun. So let me ask you this. In Top Gun, specifically, it shows this, like, they go to the bar the night before, mission, whatever. Yeah. You know where I'm going with this, right?
I think I have an idea where you go with this.
And it depicting like a very, very, like team spirit that is very unique, to the Navy and specifically to the, is there something like that in your unit where like, you go out and do like, you get, drunk together, or like you get like all this, I don't know, like whatever team spirit that's depicted in the movie. Is that something like that also happens in your neck of the woods?
I would say this is the first organization where we have not had that specific opinion. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of like personality test, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
There's a test we use in the Air Force because the Air Force is paid for it, called the 4 lenses. Basically, there's 4 color profiles that highly abstract your personality traits. Gold is organization, green is logic, blue is empathy, and orange is high speed, thrill seeking energy. And what we found when we profiled our organization is 90% were high green, logic-minded individuals. So they all ask the same questions. Why would we do that? And so our team bonds over working on the job to solve these huge problems together. And then after work, they're like, we're going to go do our own things. We're going to go hang out with our families. We're going to go. And we have like, I call it internal team spirit. Whereas when I was back out in Ramstein, working combat communications and all those project management jobs or program management, that was 100%. We're all separated from all of our families. We're in another country. We were 100% getting together. And I won't say we were all getting drunk together. There's definitely some aspect of that, but we had a lot of team building events. We had a lot of morale. We're golfing together. We're going and watching like Star Wars as a unit. There was definitely a lot more of that by nature of the environment. So I think it's very much dependent on, you make the culture based on the people that you have who are here, what makes the most sense for them. I'm not going to force a mandatory fun event if nobody wants it, but what I can do is make the work meaningful, because that's what they're here for. That is what drives almost every single person in this organization. Is the thing we're doing interesting? Yes. Say no more.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fascinating. And also, let me ask you this. It's, what I noticed that, certain courses and programs in the forces, there's a selection process, right, that you go through. And then through the course, it's almost making fries when you are putting a potato on one side and everybody's very informal on the other side. People come out from the other side with very similar attributes. And because it's not necessarily, and some of them just drop because they don't match the kind of that funnel, and they don't match the template. Do you find that's very also similar for people that enter this program and become like pen testers and become like offensive or defensive cybersecurity professionals in the forces, when they have that kind of template that they have to go through, and they are, as you mentioned, kind of uniformal on the other side?
That is actually an outstanding question.
And maybe the fries example is not, not a suitable one.
I have the gist of what you're saying. So one of the things that makes our pipeline unique and actually directly answers this question is, rather than trying to stamp a single template on here's what a cybersecurity professional is, we look at, here are the skills our cybersecurity professional needs to be good at, but we want different perspectives. We, by default, are a diverse organization. The number 3 person in my class when I went through was a maintainer, female, who had no experience with a computer until she joined the Air Force.
Amazing.
just aptitude was what got her through a strong drive to succeed. And our top two were people who were so immersed in cybersecurity and cyber aspects that they were just bored going through the course. But the different perspectives that we bring in from people who come from a maintenance background, who come from pararescue, or come from tactical things where they're down on the ground doing very physical activities, kicking in doors, to people who are office workers, we bring all that in by default because we are retrain in only.
But how do you measure that? That's so interesting, because you don't want to disqualify somebody who can be absolutely excel. And I've interviewed somebody who used to be a cashier, and now they're like a reverse engineer for malware. But how do you make sure that during the selection process you don't disqualify somebody who maybe potentially didn't have the academic or that stamp of approval that's not necessarily true. They can be very successful, but not, because I think that's what's happening as well in the corporate world. If you look at the private sector, a lot of people are not getting in because they don't have the qualification, but I think it's a wrong thing to do. So how do you overcome that?
So the Air Force's policy for retraining in actually does not require a degree. We do not require certifications. They're definitely a plus, but there's basically two core things. There is a test called the electronic data processing test. It's basically a logic exam. Can you do numerical operations? Can you do logic puzzles? Do you know word association kind of things? It's more of like a style of thought. If there's a predictor that if you are reasonably strong in this area and hit this kind of minimum benchmark, that you will find success in this curriculum, because there's a lot of data analytics. There's a lot of deep analytical thinking that we have to do by default. That's that. And then there's like an interview where you are given a test and then you're asked some questions. And the test is really stuff that, like, they literally asked you, I'm not going to go into like specifics of the test, but literally ask you, what reference did you use to help you in this exam? Hinting that you can, there is an expectation that if you don't know things, you will go out and look for it, because that's what we want to encourage. And then there's just an interview with our senior leadership based on your records. And we're just looking for people who are strong performers in their field, whatever that means to their field. That's it. No degree. I don't need a master's or a PhD to do this job. In fact, in many cases, that would be a detriment, because we want you on the leadership side, leading teams, building programs and processes to make our talent more effective at their job, rather than doing the hands-on tactical tasks that may not best utilize that level of education. Because we will teach you, we will train you, you will get experience, and we will pluck you and move you to different places. And to a certain point, you can control where you go in your career, but a lot of times it's needs of the Air Force. But there are programs out there like mine where you are specifically selected because of your prior experience and expertise, where we can pluck you. And once you're in that world, you can go where you want much more easily. But to kind of get back to where how do we make sure that our top talent is available to come in, even if they don't have a cyber degree? Like I said, the maintainer, no cyber experience on their record, clean slate. But that aptitude score that they came in with was very high. And that was a predictor that they would be very successful. And then work ethic is proven by their records. That's all I need. I don't need a whole lot more than that.
And how do you measure success today for you and your organization? Because again, it's your chief people officer responsible for getting the talent and retaining the talent and all that. How do you measure that success today? And then do you do that over time? Like you look at, like, for example, like before you join, or like 6 months ago or 3 months ago, and then, where do you build like the projection to where you want to be? Because it's a moving target, right?
Absolutely. We have a quarterly review of our program where we look at all of our milestones. And frankly, when it comes to like our hiring talents, I don't have hiring targets. I have board of director and stakeholder requirements. So everything I'm doing is being measured by what are those KPIs that I need to hit, key performance indicators. And when I'm pulling in talent, I'm pulling them in because I have interviewed them, or my team has interviewed them, embedded them, and said, this is the person who get after these problems. So I'm able to measure the success. Did you get after these problems? And we review them with all of our stakeholders and all of our board of directors members to verify that we have hit the performance. Here's where we're at. Here's where we're still missing. Here's where we have shortfalls. Here's where we are excelling. And I can map all of those to all of our team by their product owners, because we run our organization on a modified agile structure. So I have stakeholders, I have product owners, I have scrum masters, I have project officers, and each of them has specific targets, a specific checklist item, grade report, I guess you can call it, report card that they need to fulfill, every single person's organization. If you have not fulfilled that, you have not met your performance indicators. Easy. And I can tell how long it's going to take to get there because there should be regular check marks every month or key events that we are integrated with, that if we have accomplished our goal here, that's our check mark validation event. We have some risk management exercises going in before those. Boom. So I have very, very, very clear timelines and timeframes.
So you know at any given point how you're doing as an organization, which is pretty amazing. Because that's a lot of times it's like a black box, and people are not, there's, aside from like the quarterly, board review, they're like sometimes they're surprised with the results, but it's not happening here because you do have ability to figure things out like as you go, right? Let me ask you this. I read somewhere that that there's a problem now getting quality recruits on the kind of the physical forces side, okay, for various different reasons. And it's a matter of national security, right? We need to have, as a nation, we need to have a certain quality of pool for us to pull from to create a strong forces. There's just no two ways about it. We can't outsource that. Is that also true for recruiting talent, that talent pool of people that have this aptitude that you talked about, maybe for STEM and for logical thinking and stuff like that? Is it also true where you're sitting, or are we good there?
So where I sit specifically, I am hiring, generally speaking, the best of the best in their field. But from a whole force perspective, like where is the Air Force going? What are the things we're looking at? We're hearing from a lot of our senior executive leadership that one of the things they're looking at is, I guess, the Gen Z demographic, where we're talking about the kids who are losing time from COVID, how we are changing as a nation. The culture of our youth is changing. The things that they're interested in are changing. My generation, the millennials, we can go through all that, has reshaped things, and the next generations coming up are doing the same things. And as a force, we are looking at the expected changes coming from that and going, okay, what do we need to change to be more accommodating? How we have taken in recruits from basic training has changed. When I was coming in, there was very much a suck it up buttercup type attitude. But now we have mental health is being talked about much more openly, much more broadly. I have people on my roster who are going through mental health and it is not affecting their clearance. We have individuals who are coming in maybe with more of an understanding of their trauma-informed background, and we are providing them the supports that they need. So as a force, we are looking at this new generation coming up, the problems they're having. The struggle I think we're going to face is, as an organizational culture, where do we decide this is the line for this is what the military culture is, and where do we meet our recruits where they are? Because if I have a gap in education coming in and I know it's there, do I lower my standards, or do I create more programs and extend the time prior to them coming in where I can remediate some of that with specific tailored training? What's that going to cost? That's what our senior leaders are looking at, and that's what we are upchanneling our thoughts and concerns about as well, so they can make the best informed decision.
Terrance, you did phenomenally well for, like, I'm just tackling you with these not easy questions. I got to tell you, like, it's not easy. People don't realize that nothing is scripted here, and some of the questions I ask are not trivial. Let me ask you like a couple of like just last questions, and we wrap it up. And this has been really awesome, and I appreciate your time. You mentioned as a kid, right? You had to create your own fun. Your parents basically let's let you like just go out and come back before it's dark. And not a lot of like, computer like devices stuff. I mean, we see kids today that there are like, like on their little, 6-inch screens watching endless barrage of dopamine induced videos. What do you recommend, I guess, for parents or people that are watching this again to to make sure that there's a certain balance again, because I think it's a matter of national security and how we raise our kids. It will have implications eventually down the road to all of us. Any recommendation again from because you have a unique perspective on that, because you can see all those people that are now getting into, and you're in a unique position where you get the cream of the crop. So you're not, you're doing well, but still there's a larger population that doesn't fall through, or doesn't, fit the bill, and they don't go through the filter. So what are your recommendations for people that are trying to raise their kids in a certain way to become more proficient and so on? Any recommendations there?
So this is an outstanding question. So as as mentioned, I am a foster parent. And so the child that I'm adopting is a teenager, and I've had to face this head first for the last 5 years. What has worked more or less for me is I have to be very engaged in what he's doing.
It's a sample size of 1, and I'll take it.
Sample size of 5. So I've been a foster parent since 2018.
Yeah, amazing.
And I've raised 4 kids on my own, and I've been a youth mentor for 17 years. I have a lot of experience working with youth. But teenagers, right? What has helped for me is, especially when my son was very junior, when he was 14, I had specific restrictions on his phone and his devices. I have, especially coming from a cybersecurity background, every device I can turn off on my phone. I can lock him out of his network. I can lock him out of his phone. I can lock him out of his other devices, and I can minimize and specifically tailor his time on his devices. But I also have to face him and tell him, hey, how long have you been on your device? How long have you been on YouTube? And make him think about it and go, hey, that's enough of that, and be a parent. If I have to take his phone away from him because he's misbehaving or not following the guidelines I've laid out for him, I take his phone away. I force him to do other activities because that's what I have to do as parents. Not easy. Sometimes I have to fight him to do these things. But I have to engage. But things that do make it easier, if you have a lot of internet connected devices, you can set timers on your router. You can set up specific programs on those devices that communicate with your phone, so you can lock them out on certain times or give them a certain period that which they can use their device. Give them a Chromebook, and you can lock all that stuff down. That can help. That can go a long way. But the only thing I can say that's going to work for most parents is you have to engage your children and not just give them the device and take the easy way out. On a long road trip, I get it. You don't want to hear 1,000 questions. You don't want to have to focus on driving and dealing with the kids in the back seat when you can just give them something to watch a movie. But as parents, as adults, we have to set the stage for creating the environment we want to see. And if we're taking the easy way, what we're telling them is, this is the way to solve your problems. If you're bored, use this. We're not teaching them to use their imagination. We're not finding creative ways. And if we're not good at that because we're following in those same traps, we got to start fixing that at home.
Yes. And do you find that there are any activities that are, and again, like sometimes I use examples. So, sometimes, with drug addicts, because I see there's a lot of similarities with addiction to these devices. And sometimes the drug addicts, like, depending on the drug, they'll give you like a drug substitute, like a methadone or something, like some sort of thing where it's just almost, but not quite, and it's not as bad. Do you have something like that in the, kind of the digital world where you can substitute those devices and that rush that they get from these devices with other activities that potentially can overcome and have interest to them?
I do. And every parent of a millennial is going to shake their fist at the sky. Video games. But not just any video games. I'm not talking about Candy Crush or mobile games that are time wasters. I'm talking very specific games that have a specific storyline and come with a lot of problem-solving techniques, platformers, anything that forces you to use your brain and think through the challenges that are being presented to you. I have on record telling my son, hey, get off YouTube, go play a video game.
But which one?
I make him play. He bought a Nintendo Entertainment System, the old NES, and he's playing the original Mario. And that game is notoriously difficult because there's a lot of timing, a lot of concentration that you need. Love it. I try to get him into playing role-playing games, RPGs, like Final Fantasy and things like that, because there's a lot of very specific tactical things you're doing that build into strategic mindsets. And it forces you to think about your next move and think in advance. Rhythm games are awesome. You have a lot of a lot of options, I think, in the PlayStation 2 era type games. Give them a PS2, give them Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank. Find these games that force you to think and solve problems and watch them excel and be there to help them when they feel, I'm bored or my attention's like, no, you finish that level and stay on them and be a parent about it. It's weird that I have to tell them to play video games, but that has helped.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that, Terrance. So, Terrance, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you for any reason, just feedback, just get in touch, whatever the case may be? What's the easiest way?
Absolutely. I always make some time on my schedule to be available on LinkedIn. So that's probably the easiest way to catch me. You find me. I generally, as long as you're not giving me a sales request, please don't send me unsolicited sales requests. But I'll generally accept most connections. And I'm always looking for other risk management expertise to help me bolster my experience and trade those stories back and forth. But LinkedIn, number one place to find me.
Thank you very much. And it's been a very inspirational conversation today, Terrance. I really appreciate that. If anybody who's watching this, if you have any other, strategy games that you feel are like, on the list of what Terrance just mentioned, I think that's a phenomenal idea. Forcing kids to move away from the devices into the strategy and more, thinking games. I think it's probably one of the best, answers I ever got for asking the same questions, because I'm like you. I'm struggling with the same issues today. But until then, thank you very much for joining today. Much appreciated. Until next time, be safe online as well as offline. And thanks again, Terrance Cooley, for joining me today. Much appreciated.
Appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.